Hello, I'm the Reverend Dr. Don Anderson, and I'm your host for this program of Access Rhode Island. Welcome. Our topic tonight is a serious one, and one that is actually a growing topic in the United States, the issue of mass incarceration. Our guest this evening is Senator Harold Metz. Welcome, Senator Metz.
Thank you, Reverend Anderson.
We're glad to have Senator Metz here. He's a representative of District 6 in Providence. He wasn't born in Rhode Island, but came back as an infant. His parents are native Rhode Islanders, and he spent his whole life here. Graduated from 3 institutions of higher education in Rhode Island, has been an assistant principal in the Providence school system. He's a member of the NAACP, the Urban League, and one of the things that is near and dear to my heart, he's a deacon at Congdon Street Baptist Church. And he's come to us tonight to talk to us and to have a conversation to introduce the topic of mass incarceration. For a lot of people in America, this is an emerging topic and one that folks are just beginning to know about. Because I have the book on Kindle, I couldn't show you my Kindle, but fortunately, Reverend Metz brought his book with him. And the book that introduced me to this particular issue that was recommended to me by a pastor is this book by Michelle Alexander called The New Jim Crow, talking about mass incarceration in the United States and especially its implications for the African American and Hispanic communities. And as we go forward, we'll make some reference to this book, but would encourage you to consider using this book as a text yourself for learning more about this issue. In the United States, our prison population has quadrupled since 1980 to 2.2 million people. We are the largest jailer of any country in the world. We have more people in prison than Russia, and the third most country in the world that keeps people in prison is South Africa. But we have the distinction of having more people in prison than any other country in the world. Also, this population has not only grown in the last 10 years to 2.2 million, but we also have 10 times the number of people in prison than most other industrialized nations. So clearly, we're out of sync, and we want to talk a little bit about that this evening. Senator Metz, I know that beyond your professionalism as a legislator, that you also have a personal interest in folks that are spending time in prison here in Rhode Island. What if you could just talk a little bit about your background and some of the things that you do that get you personally engaged in the issue of incarceration?
Well, to add to the statistics that you gave, in Rhode Island, per 100,000, 191 whites are in prison, 631 Hispanics, and 1,838 African Americans. So you can see the disparities right there.
And I'm going to ask you to repeat those slowly so people can really see the disparity, because that's something that we have to talk about as we move on in the program. Can you repeat those numbers one more time?
Out of 100,000 people, based on 100,000, 191 whites, 631 Hispanics, and 1,838 blacks.
And that's right here in the state of Rhode Island.
State of Rhode Island.
That's great, thank you. So tell us a little more about your personal engagement.
Well, how I get into prison ministry, I've been volunteering at the ACI for 13 years in Medium 1. And I was in the House, and I got out in 1998 at the time, the same year I was ordained as a deacon. So people thought I was still in the political arena before I got in the Senate. So a young man, a former student, came up to me and said, Mr. Metz, he said, I served my time. I need a job to take care of my family. If I put on the application I have a record, they won't hire me. And if I lie about it and they find out, they fire me. I served my time. I have a wife and kids. I want to work. I want to put my past behind me. So I went to a few agencies, the State Council of Churches, who had a committee. And since I made the inquiry, I got put on the committee.
That's what always happens, right?
And so then they had the State Council of Churches sponsored an event. It was called Reviving the Spirit of Prison Ministry. And we let them host it at our church, the Congress Street Baptist Church, and the Reverend Dr. Ronnie McLeod, who had got his doctorate while in a New York prison, came and he preached from Daniel in the lion's den. And Deacon Gibb and I was on fire. We got so excited. The deacon he said, "Come on, we're going to sign up for prison ministry," and we did. And it's been a blessing trying to help people to reclaim their lives.
It's great. And now you go to the prison on a fairly regular basis.
I go on Sunday mornings from 8:30 to about 10 with the Reverend Janice Byers and her husband, Reverend Carson Byers, at the Medium 1 facility at the ACI.
That's a great service. I've been there a number of times myself, and it's anything but dull and boring.
Yes, it is very lively service because, of course, they have some people that were professional musicians, and some of them sometimes the choir sounds better than it does at some churches because of the quality of the musicians that they have.
Well, I would say many churches, because I get a chance to go to many churches, and they have a great choir there. So let's talk a little bit about some of the reasons why we've had this great increase in the number of people who have been incarcerated. If you look at a chart, in fact, I would say to some of our listeners, if you go and Google mass incarceration and go to Wikipedia, there's a great chart there that shows how for a number of decades, the number of people we had in prison in the United States was fairly level. It grew, but just at very, very small rates. And then in 1980, it takes this incredible sharp incline upward in terms of the number of people. So let's talk a little bit about some of the reasons why, since 1980, we've had that kind of sharp increase. What are some of your thoughts?
Well, I think it was with the war on drugs and everybody wanting to get tough on crime. You had the three strikes laws. And so you get 2 offenses, and some of the stories that I heard, there was someone that on his 3rd offense, he broke into a food pantry for food, and that was 3 strikes, so he got put in prison for life. There was someone else that wrote a check for the 3rd offense for $100 and change. So the 3 strikes laws were a big part of it. And then the mandatory sentencing. And then as the economy turned out in 2008 when we had the recession and states were looking for how they can save money in their budgets, they found out that the mandatory sentencing was astronomically increasing state budgets. So with the economy and the state that it made people look at some of the public policy that was affecting the state budget, and they found out, well, maybe we shouldn't have these mandatory sentencing, and we need to give the judges discretion. So we were able to get something passed here in Rhode Island to do away with some of the mandatory sentencing and to give the judges discretion, because it's a big difference between someone who has youthful indiscretions and foolish in your youth, and you get caught with a certain amount of drugs and you automatically get a certain amount of time as opposed to a career criminal. So at least the judge would be able to look at the circumstances and maybe give you a little slap on the wrist. This is your first offense, but with those mandatory sentencing, it really skewed it in the direction of those statistics and those charts that you looked at.
Right, and there's a great cost to society in a number of ways. One way is what it costs to keep people in prison.
Yes, it's around $50,000 a year to keep an adult. And I don't know what it is now, but I know several years ago, for one minor at the training school, it was like $98,000, close to $100,000 for one kid at the training school. So it is very, very costly.
Right, and that doesn't even begin to count the personal cost to that individual, to their families, to their children, and the issues that work there in terms of what it costs society. Obviously, if someone's serving time in prison, they're not gainfully employed paying taxes. So, you know, there's all kinds of ways in which, because we put people in prison, that society loses out as a whole. We all lose. It isn't just the person who's in prison that loses, but we all lose. And we lose the benefit. I've met a number of these people, many of whom are fairly young, who have talented people and have great potential, but now that they have a prison record behind them, it makes everything that much more difficult. Mm-hmm. And I know that I've talked to a number of people who've said, "There, but for the grace of God, you know, go I." And
well, me too. I grew up on the South Side, so I thank God for His grace. Absolutely.
Yeah. Because we all have done stupid things in our lives, and some people get caught, and some people are fortunate enough to not get caught.
And then the other piece of it, I put it in for, it used to be the Family Life Center. They're open doors now, so quite a bit of legislation I put in through them and DARE. But one was the court fines bill. And what happened was they found out if you're indigent, you can't afford to pay your fines. So at one time, they were incarcerating people because they couldn't pay their fines, which cost more than the fines. Yeah. So that was another thing that had to be addressed. So,
Senator, let's talk about one of the uncomfortable parts of this conversation, but it's an important part of this conversation. Race is a significant part of this conversation. You've already raised the issue of the number of people here in Rhode Island that are Caucasian as opposed to folks who are Hispanic background, as opposed to folks who are African Americans, and the great discrepancy. In the United States, African Americans make up about 16% of the population, yet 40% of the prison population in this country is made up of African Americans. That is a disparity that is hardly coincidental. It's not just a blip on the chart. There's something radically wrong here, and obviously race somehow plays a part. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, certainly, even the title of Michelle Alexander's book about the new Jim Crow, it's certainly a part of it, because even as a kid, I can remember 5 years old taking the train from Rhode Island to Virginia, and at Washington, D.C., it was segregation. So as a 5-year-old, I remember having to get off one train with my mother and going to a segregated train to go into Virginia. And I never forget that. There's some things that different neighborhoods where you live, walking down the street, and I used to walk to a gym to play basketball, staying out of trouble. And if I went down a certain street, I always would get stopped by the police. And the message was, boy, don't walk down this street. So I would have to walk down a street closer to the graveyard on Elmwood Avenue, and I wouldn't get stopped. And, you know, you go into a store, and I used to love it when the bells go off and the store detectives follow you around, and I would have them following me all over the store. But it's almost like people have the low expectations of you, and you're almost the thought is, with the stereotypes, is to try to give you a feeling of inferiority. And so these are the things that you battle internally. And you have to have a good self-concept. You have to know your history. You have to know your culture. You have to have good people. I had good teachers and coaches, white and black, that encouraged me to say, you know, you got to get your education. But some of my friends didn't make it. Out of the people that I graduated with, Central High School, Providence, Rhode Island, 50% of us went to the military, work, or college. A few of us went to college, and the others are dead or in jail. It was almost like a 50-50 split. But it's the expectations and the barriers that are set up by society that really tries to hold people back. And then when you lose hope or you need to survive, then you go into a subculture. I wasn't a woman beater, so I wasn't going to be a pimp. I didn't like the heroin used to be big when I was a teenager, young adult. I wasn't going to stick no needle in my arm, so I knew I wasn't going to be no drug dealer. But to survive, you had to hustle, gamble, shoot pool, crap, whatever it was. So you're almost forced into the things that you really shouldn't have to be in. But you had to learn how to break the stereotypes, and the way was education, even though some of the schools in our community were a little substandard.
So you were engaged in the Providence school system for a number of years as a teacher, as an administrator. One of the things we know that across the country, we know it's true here in Rhode Island, that as this prison population went up to 2.2 million, we know that the number of children of incarcerated persons went from 350,000 to 2.1 million. So we have more children in our school system whose parent, or in some cases parents, because this issue unfortunately has affected women as well, have a parent or parents in prison. What kinds of things did you see happening in the school system with some of these children?
Being from the same background, I was a little bit more sensitive, because I had a young man that I coached. Both his parents was in jail, both, not just one, were incarcerated. So we kind of took him under our wing. And so you have to be very understanding when they express the anger. Because it would have been very easy for me to, when someone cusses you out, to kind of retaliate out of anger. So you have to kind of hold your peace, knowing the population that you're there to serve, and to be understanding. And yes, you still have to discipline to try to change that behavior, but you also have to show some love, and you have to show some understanding. Otherwise, the kids won't have a chance.
Senator, we also know that so much of what happens in prisons varies from state to state. In some states that are larger, it varies from county to county. Here in Rhode Island, you were very involved in some legislation last year that had to do with folks when they get out of prison and finding employment. You already talked a little bit about a former student or a young man who came up to you and said, "I'm out of prison now, and I've got to find a job." Could you talk a little bit about the legislation that is commonly known as Ban the Box? Because I know we're one of the leading states in this country to engage in Ban the Box legislation. There's still a number of states that are talking about this. Could you talk a little bit about Ban the Box?
Yes, some community advocates from DARE, Direct Action for Rights and Equality, several years ago asked me to put in the legislation. So on the old job applications, if you had a felony, if you had ever been arrested, you had to fill out that you was arrested. So we know once the prospective employer saw that information on the application, we know what happened to that application. So with the Ban the Box, that information's not on there. Now, once you get to the interview, the employer can ask you the question, but at least it gives you a chance to tell your story. And then the other piece is, which is, I consider it a miracle. The Constitution had to be changed to allow, in other states, once you're a felon, you can't vote. In Rhode Island, your rights are restored once you get out of jail. And that took a constitutional amendment, so that was another one. And then there's the Certificate of Good Behavior, where you can get a certificate through probation and parole. And if you've been going to your drug counseling, and you've gotten some education, and you've done certain things, and over a certain period of time you've shown some good behavior, they'll give you a certificate that you can take to the job with you, so you can better present yourself. So those are some of the things that we've been involved in.
That's great. I know it's early, so you may not have an example of this, but has anybody come to you, and are you aware of anyone who's been able to benefit from Ban the Box? I realize legislation is pretty new, so.
Not yet, but I had a deacon, and I'm trying to think of the church. He came to testify for the bill. When he was 19, he's in his 40s now, he was involved in drugs. And the only thing he can get now is part-time jobs at the convention center. And so he came, and I saw him at a recent event. I went to my childhood church, Christ Temple, and his church was there. So he came up to me, and he was thankful that legislation had passed.
Well, I remember him testifying there, because I was there to testify for that bill as well. And I remember listening to him, and I thought to myself, here's a man who's incredibly articulate, just had the way he presented himself was terrific. He's somebody that anyone would be happy to invite into their home as a dinner guest and to have there. And I remember him just saying, you know, I'm not the knucklehead at 40 that I was at 18 when I did some stupid thing. And yet that follows him and had a profound impact on the type of employment he was able to get. And I was absolutely convinced myself that this man is capable of making a much greater contribution to society and helping us all. I mean, because certainly he was bright and articulate and would be a really good person to have engaged in anything in society. Are there other bills that are kind of hanging out there, or other legislative efforts that you're aware of that we should be thinking about as we, look to the future on these issues?
Well, I think that people lose sight of the recidivism. And I believe in 24 months, the recidivism rate is 42%. So it's one thing to turn people out and to release them, but if there's not reentry programs, I was blessed to be sent by the Senate President to a conference down in Washington, D.C., and I was my traveling buddy was Director Wall.
Oh, okay. A.T. Wall was our
So
director.
I was with all the people from all the professionals from that area, and I was a legislator. And one of the things that they said is reentry is a three-legged stool. You need a house, you need a job, and you need supportive services, especially those that are dealing with addiction. When those three things are in place, you can turn your life around. So some of the cities, I believe it was people from New York and some other bigger cities, they had examples of when they use resources and change policy, and they put the resources into the policy to have that three-legged stool. They was able to help people turn their lives around and to save the taxpayers money by doing so. So it's a good investment, and I guess the challenge is to get people to understand that we're investing in people, and you're saving the taxpayers money by directing the resources into those areas as opposed to just punishing people and locking them up.
Can you reiterate the three legs of that stool again for me? Because I think it's important for our listeners to be aware of those three legs of that stool.
When people are released from prison, they need a house, they need a place to stay, they need a job, and they need supportive services. All three areas are crucial, and when all three are in place, people can turn their lives around.
So, Senator Metz, we have folks who watch this, many of whom are engaged in some sort of a faith community, whether it be a mosque or a church or a synagogue. What are some ways in which some of those communities might be able to help and assist people, especially as they re-enter society?
Well, especially people from the all faiths, but certainly from our tradition was Matthew 25. People forget a piece of it. I was hungry, you fed me. I was naked, you clothed me. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came unto me. And even as a faith community, I believe that we can do more, because that last piece, once you get that record, it's like you have the scarlet A on your head, and no one wants to deal with you. People, society writes you off, and then we know the cost of this, the social safety network to take care of your family, your kids, or even you when going into the homeless shelter, whatever it is, the food pantries. So there is a cost to society, and I think that we can do more to increase awareness that we're investing in people. This is good public policy. The money that we put toward that three-legged stool will pay dividends for society in the long run, because if we neglect that population, what's the Fram oil commercial? Pay me now for the oil filter, or pay me for the new engine. And so that's where we're at with that. We really have to start investing in people. And
that really is I think the correct terminology, invest. That we really are talking about, if we have resources, we want to increase our resources. If you own a business, you spend money to get better equipment, to hire more employees, you invest in your company so that your company can grow and do a better job. And that's exactly the kind of thing we're talking about here. We're talking about investing in people who will respond when they have the chance to do that. So, Senator Metz, as we start to think about bringing the program to a close shortly, I'm just wondering, what gives you hope? What makes you think about looking at these very, very difficult statistics, looking at the racial nature of this problem? What gives you hope as we move forward into the future?
What gives me hope is I see some of the attitudes changing. We still have a long ways to go, but to have the right to vote passed, to have the ban the box passed. We're working on racial profiling, which is going to be called the Community Police and Community Act, the court fines bill, to see the community more engaged, and we certainly need more engagement. That gives me hope, and we have to give people. We have to give people hope that even the people, not just changing the attitudes and the hearts of the general public, but the people that are incarcerated, the people that are of faith can hang on a little bit longer. But those that don't have a strong faith background, they give up a little bit quicker. And when they give up, that's why the recidivism rate is so high. So we have to give people hope, and certainly, what better organization than the church? Our churches are in a position to do that.
That's great. Senator, I just want to go back to one more thing as we come back, and I don't want to get you in trouble with the Senate President at all, but I'm just wondering, as we look at this issue, when we talk about hope, how do you see folks that are in the House of Representatives or in the Senate in terms of understanding this issue? Do you think this is a well-understood issue, or is there a strong need for more education in this issue?
We need to increase awareness. More education is certainly politically. I'd look better if I'm tough on crime. That sounds good at election time, being tough on crime. But when you explain to people the real cost to society from a public safety perspective, and thanks for reminding me we're about the same age. I don't want to be on the street at night and run across a person that doesn't have any hope. A person without hope is a dangerous person.
That's right.
I'm a senior citizen now. I can't scrap. I can't scrap like I used to when I was younger, and I can't run as fast as I used to run. So we have to give people hope, because otherwise, from a safety perspective, from public safety perspective, if we don't help people, then we make matters worse.
Great. So I have a very quick question. I need a quick answer here. But we're coming up on an election year, and folks are here. What can they say to someone who's running for office in their area if they're concerned about mass incarceration? What would be the one or two questions they could ask people to kind of bring it up on their radar screen? Because you and I both know if people who are running for state rep or state senator hear people in their district asking questions, they pay attention.
Well, you ask them questions about reentry. You ask them questions about expungement. And certainly your work and that of the State Council of Churches is poverty. Poverty is a big part of the cause, the root cause of a lot of these things. So what do we have? What are we doing for to end homelessness? Because I go to your rallies all the time. What are we doing? Because when we address some of these root causes, some of these other things will take care of themselves.
That's great. Well, Senator Metz, I'm so pleased that you're able to come and be with us tonight, take the time out to be here, because you not only have the legislative background and experience, but you have the life experience as an educator in Providence and working with folks in the prison system right now. So thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate your being here. For those of you who are at home, realize that this is an important issue for the United States, but it's a critical issue here in the state of Rhode Island. In the months ahead, you'll be hearing more about this, and trust that you'll become better informed and also become engaged so that all of us will be able to enjoy a better Rhode Island. Thank you for listening.